So we started the evening with a definition as proposed by the CHEOPS crew. Smart. Smart means the act of having intelligence, being capable of independent action, following that intelligence. And we can just, by the way, on my note it says the host and 4 speakers will sit on stage and there will be a discussion that the audience participates in as well. So you need to invite yourself to contribute. So it was already predetermined. But maybe I can maybe I should start with Hugo.
Well, I'm not actually sure what's meant for this, but what I do think is that smart is. I don't think it's just this. It's more. That's always difficult. Sometimes I ask people, what about what actually is smart building, and it depends on which country even I am. And in France they say, well, it's all about sustainability. Well, it's actually more. Having a system that actually can get of all the data it gets, and the more data it gets, the more smarter it gets. But at some point, being independent, I'm not sure it's really getting independent, because then we're getting in like Skynet, Terminator kind of things. So let's hope that doesn't happen. But actually, what you're seeing is, and there's a lot of examples on the internet as well. I just read something about it, about systems that get really smart, and like chatbots and those kind of things. You get with a lot of data, you can get some kind of an artificial intelligence. And when you have, well, the more data you get, the more intelligent it gets. But really independent, and maybe somehow self-aware. I'm not sure. That's a step that's. I'm not sure we're going to get that far.
Okay, so maybe you can pass it on to Constantijn, because I think you're both in kind of the same field, and so I thought about different ways in which you can define smart then, based on your stories, and you're both more in the data kind of field. So, what was your response? Do you think that the kind of building that you're building is going to be a building that will think for people, or thinks for itself, and offers people personalized advice based on the data that comes in, for instance?
I think it's most of all about the ability to learn. That's also what Hugo just said. It's about machine learning, and the buildings we develop right now are in the early stages of learning. The first step for the buildings we develop right now is just to make buildings which are user-friendly by using technology. And the next step forward is making buildings that can actually learn. And I think that's also a very difficult step within developing buildings, because then you have the ethical discussion. Do we want buildings to think for us or not? Who's in control?
Right. Yeah. And so, Allison, there's another category that we already touched upon at the end of your presentation, which is more like the smartness of material, or maybe learning new materials or getting to know new materials in order to solve problems that we have, but not focusing on the data, but focusing on the material. And you also mentioned the concept of responsibility. So maybe your design contributes something to responsible buildings, or makes buildings in a way responsible in a more abstract sense. And I also thought that combined really well with what I said earlier about intelligence, that a large part of intelligence is being able to be ethical, or being able to be moral and distinguish types of actions. Could you apply that to your design? Is that how is responsibility? What kind of role does responsibility play in your design?
Oh, that's a loaded.
Sorry.
It's a hard thing to answer. I think our perspective has never been an ethical one. We've been very, I would say we've been very objective in how we apply these things. we get asked sometimes, maybe it's another question that we get asked sometimes, is how green do you think you are, and how much do you believe in sustainability and eco-futures? And I mean, I'm a little dystopian. I'm not the one that's going to stand here and say we're going to solve it. But I do think that smartness is something that architecture needs. I'm very practical about it. I feel like there are other industries that are able to handle performance with technology, and the building and the architecture industry just aren't there. So for me, the component of science and doing something with materials on a cellular level can make something smarter than it is. It makes it interact with the city. And I think in that way, that smartness is more like a consciousness. And maybe that translates to the building owners as well. I think it becomes attractive, which smart essentially is attractive to people. I think that's why we gather together and we talk about all these things and get excited about it. And I think that will come forward. But where it sits ethically, I mean, I'm quite happy to be uncomfortable about to let that tension stay there and stay in the conversation.
Good. Okay, so you could pass it on to Constantijn, because so do you agree with Allison saying that smartness can be also, it's a kind of consciousness, it's a kind of interaction with other people and learning and getting together that seems to strike us a little bit?
Yeah, it does in one way, but at the other way, I think the difficulty with the word smart itself is it's like a pronouns. Or bijvoeglijk voornaamwoord. Actually, the description which is on the board right now kind of looks, I think, more like the definition of an algorithm. If you look at self-learning capabilities. And I think the true definition of smart will only become clear if you combine it to another word. So, for example, in our case, we're talking about a smart city. So this is about the environment where people live. So in this way, a smart city can be a city where technology is used to benefit its users. But in her way, smart applies to the material. So that might have impact on resources. So I think that should be taken into account.
So perhaps we have to probably redefine that definition.
Yeah. Sorry.
All right. Are there any questions or contributions from the audience? Do you not agree? Do you agree? I can see some. Can you speak up a little bit because we're short on microphones?
Yeah, of course. I've got a question for OG, because we're talking about, actually buildings getting smarter than people, and I think we're going to that pretty soon. The edge is already smarter than we are. And while reading that sentence, being capable of indefinite action following intelligent and independent. Don't you think that making buildings which are smarter than we are will be dangerous for that sentence, for the capability of doing things on our own and not the buildings making decisions for us instead of we do?
Okay, so the question is that whether buildings that you propose, whether they actually endanger this definition.
Yeah, the first thing is that the buildings we make right now are not smarter than we are. So that's the first step. And the second step is that if we go on with developing smart buildings, we have to be really careful with how far we go in that smartness. Because I think in the end, the most important thing is that you have the flexibility as an individual, and you are free as an individual to choose your own way within the building. That's the dilemma if you want to develop smart buildings. You have to keep in mind what's the goal, the purpose, why you develop smart buildings. It's for the people.
All right, question in the back.
I would like to react to that because you saying we have to think about it, but what if the building gets hacked or something? Basically, you're supplying somebody with all the sensors, they need maybe even control over the building. Is that dangerous?
Is it dangerous when the building gets hacked?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, maybe it is dangerous, but right now I don't think it is dangerous, because the data we use right now is not personalized. So between brackets, the only danger right now is that a company is not able to work. So it's a more, I think right now it's more a financial problem if you're hacked than a.
But what if you apply to a hospital? Then
Sorry?
So basically you get hacked, all the electricity gets shut down.
Yeah.
So there's a problem for a normal company, but for a hospital.
For a hospital, yeah, in a hospital it's another. We don't develop hospitals. Maybe Dring can answer that question, but yeah, then you have a problem. But there's always a backup.
You do hospitals.
I'd like to direct my question to Allison from advertising management. You mentioned the construction industry. I think you said it accounts for 40%, maybe I remember wrong, of CO2 emissions. And then you mentioned about the smart materials used in the facade. And I've also come across other materials, carbon negative, cement, for example. But my question is, in order to encourage the use of those smart materials, don't we need smart policies? And in absence of those policies, can't we encourage people to go into this technology?
So, do we need smart policies? And if we cannot arrange that, how do we encourage people to buy these kinds of products or to replace them?
It's a great question. I just have to make two corrections first. The 40% accounts for the amount of manufacturing globally. So the construction industry, it's not a CO2 emission, it's just they're making 40% of our stuff. And the other thing is, concrete is not carbon negative. It's such a CO2 intensive process.
There is a special type of concrete cement that
Yeah.
is designed, the university in the UK, that is carbon negative. It's a special
Yeah,
type of
I've heard about that. I don't, yeah. Yeah, I've heard about that. I'll reserve my comment. But I think that the question about incentive is really important. And that's something that we're struggling with because, you know, as architects, we're in a business and we're constantly confronted with cost-benefit analysis. So if you're a building owner, you want to know, why should I spend my money on this? Like in the legal framework, and certainly the, you know, like LEED points and BREEAM, maybe we're not going to get so much for lowering our carbon balance. Or maybe we are. You know, it just depends on how you play that game. And so really it comes down to, what else is it going to benefit me and my company? And I think then you have to depend on things like corporate social responsibility. You have to know that consumers and building users are changing their minds with what they'll spend their money on. People are becoming more activist about this. It's a very ground up thing. And it's going to take a lot of time. And I think it's right to go that way. The policymakers aren't going to make the decision until people on the ground say we've had enough of our architecture being dumb and enough of building with things that are going to ruin our future. And so I think there's that awareness and that education has to happen and trickle up. And then you'll see a lot more private companies, infrastructure. I think it's really easy to implement these kinds of things that I was showing and other technologies as well. It's not that hard, but it'll take some time. It's not happening yet.
I do want to add something to the previous question.
Yes.
About security. I think you don't have to see a smart city as one big system. It just exists about smaller systems, so it's not, for example, if one department gets hacked or whatever, the complete city is down or that all data is lost. You have smaller systems with have rules themselves as well. So for example, if you look at the lightning system, you have of course the functionalities to make the system react on events or whatever you want. But well, the first rule, which is lightning, is always the strongest one, and it cannot be hacked. So therefore, you've got. It's maybe hard to explain this way, but and this way you kind of prevent that the system will collapse. So just build off several security layers, and I hope this makes your question a little bit clear that there's been thought about it. So it's not just plug and play sensors, collect data and see what happens, but there's actually way more behind it. We're also working together with a company called BitSensor. They're actually students from the university. I thought they hacked Marktplaats or something like that, but they're capable to detect also different data streams. So therefore, you know, for example, earlier when you were hacked, before, for example, something bad happens. So yeah, in this way you can protect your building or your city.
This is called BitSensor?
BitSensor, yeah.
You all know it, because I really know that.
No,
You know it personally?
It's my roommate.
It's
Oh, yeah. Send Alex my regards then. Yeah.
I'll do.
Okay, cool. And so can someone explain to me what they do? Like, what is are they a group of hackers, or are they?
No, they're ethical hackers, so they only hack on demand. So that's. But what they do at our side, or they're going to do, they are going to follow the data streams.
Yeah.
So what comes in and what goes out. And if you're hacked, there are of course different data streams working with other IP addresses, and they can kind of detect that, and therefore you get instant notice when your system is hacked or being hacked.
Yeah.
So it kind of is like a firewall for your city or your smart building.
Yeah. That's actually a nice starting point maybe for my next question, because this is a very concrete example of how you can protect a very important value, for instance, safety in your designs of smart cities. But there are many other values like health or stability or happiness or whatsoever. I was wondering if maybe Hugo also has an example of how you protect, for instance, I don't know, like the value of privacy. Like how do you protect it? Do you have a concrete example of how this is protected?
Yeah, well, I actually mentioned it earlier, but just don't store it. Don't store the data that is that could be you call it, that could be intrusive for somebody's privacy. Like don't store where the information about the individual when he's in a certain place. You can show it, but don't store it.
Yeah.
So that's one way. And the other way is secure it really well.
Yeah.
But don't store it. I think that's the best way.
Okay, is that generally shared or? Yeah.
Yeah, and also when you want to collect data, it's a national rule that there should be a reason to collect it at first sight, otherwise it's illegal.
Yeah.
And the effect of the data which you collect always has to be minimized. So for example, the case which I named, which were the video and the audio sensors, they are capable to collect all audio and video streams, but it is not necessary to detect only events. So even if we collected all these data, we were illegal. So in this way, it kind of also, I think, protects the inhabitants of the city. So you always have to think about what you store and what kind of impact it has.
Yeah, true. Although I think lots of the information or the data that is gathered often doesn't fall under current jurisdiction. So there's many data that you can just use. And so are there also policies for that? So do you have like a code of conduct or something else to cover?
Well, together with Osborne and Clark, we kind of have a framework for privacy protection, but the main problem with smart city techniques is they are mainly new. And rules always go way behind. So yeah, you always have to take that into account.
Yeah. So are there special teams who work on that or who
yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, it's difficult because at the end you can't take a note like, oh yeah, everything is fixed, because when there are no rules, yeah, it's
Yeah.
always researching. Eh? So, yeah. Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Another question, this is a general one, but it has to do again with data and privacy, but not with hacking, but how actually companies use this data. And I will give you an example. I was in a presentation in summer where we actually showed how it's possible to use readings from energy consumption to actually find out what kind of TV show we're watching. It's possible to do that.
You can do way more in shoes. You can, for example, see what kind of glue you are using, or hair wax, or that kind of stuff. But it's not allowed. So.
But this is just from the smart meter readings of energy consumption. Using an algorithm, you can find out what kind of TV show, what somebody was watching, or what kind of radio somebody was listening. It's possible to do that. So what I'm saying is this data has the potential to be used heavily in advertising. Is there any policy that you're aware of that we can either reward the users for providing this data, or is there any policy that protects the user from this kind of situation? I know this is the features of the scenario, but it can be done even now.
So a lot of data that may seem very innocent in a way can be used for lots of different reasons. It can be used for advertising or maybe even social control or etc. What do you think?
Well, it's kind of, I can imagine you have a very good question. But of course you can't prevent, after all, which kind of data sets are being connected to each other. But I don't see, for example, at CHEOPS a point why we should collect that kind of data, because what we actually want to do is to add value to an environment instead of making money out of data. So in this way, I think it's already kind of embedded in our development approach. But it's difficult, maybe. It's of course the question, but.
CHEOPS, I would like to thank you all. We brought some gifts for you. We have 4 bottles of wine and 1 bar of chocolate because someone is flying home. So I'm sorry for that. But chocolate you can bring in the plane and wine is a bit more difficult. So, and with that, I would like to thank again you all for coming here. I enjoyed it a lot. I hope you did too. The speakers will be around maybe at the bar for a while if you have some questions. Any more after this debate. So yeah, again, thank you all for coming here and I hope to see you next time.